All right, I'm a little tired here. Errors found within the Qur'an. For centuries, Muslims have been taught to believe that the Qur'an has been preserved in its original Arabic form since the beginning of time itself, and preserved intact from the period of time of the sending down of the book to Muhammad, right on down till the present. They have been taught that the text which we read now is uniquely inspired and that there were no intermediary agents who could possibly pollute the integrity of the script. How about human translators into other languages? That's not in turn. I constantly talk to them, but they just go nuts when I start talking about a question. At the same time, they have also been taught that this suggested textual perfection of the book proves that the Qur'an must be the Word of God, as no one but Allah could have created and preserved such a perfected text. But it isn't. This sentiment has become so strongly established in the Muslim world, they're reverse engineering it, that one will rarely find a Muslim scholar willing to make any critical analysis of its content or of its structure, as to do so would usually be detrimental to his or her health. However, when an analysis is made by a Western scholar upon the Qur'an, that analysis is roundly castigated as being biased from the outset and even satanic, and therefore unworthy of a reply. And I got that response several times, last Saturday and today, which is Saturday, when they have their own tent down there at the Balboa Park that I frequent. But that does not stop the analysis from being undertaken, for the Qur'an, when held up to scrutiny, finds itself lacking in many areas. As we have already discussed, we find problems with its sources, its collation, its literary makeup, its supposed uniqueness, and problems even with its content. It is not difficult to find numerous contradictions within the Qur'an, a problem which Muslims and the Qur'an has attempted to alleviate by conveniently allowing for the law of abrogation. But even more devastating towards the integrity of this supposed perfect divine book are the numerous errors which are found in its pages. It is therefore to those errors which we will now turn in our continuing quest to ascertain whether, indeed, the Qur'an can claim to be true and perfect Word of God, as Muslims have so often maintained since the very inception of their faith. They do it reverse engineer. In my discussion today with them, which almost got violent, they wouldn't let me finish their talk. They would give me 15 points to answer, and I forget, when you present 15 points to answer, which are all vague and nonsensical and don't relate to one another, I can't remember any of it. Anybody can. Besides, a discussion, which they disagree, is you make a point, then I listen to it, and then I see where I agree or disagree and comment on it, and you respond. That's what a debate and a discussion is all about. You don't swamp me with 16 points that don't make any sense, and then I forget the first point. They just claim that I'm an old and feeble man and minded. Contradictions within the Bible, contradictions with the Bible which point to errors. Many errors are found in the Qur'an which contradict the biblical account. In the previous section, we discussed a number of these contradictions in some detail, so I won't repeat them here, he says. Suffice it to say that because the Qur'an followed these scriptures and made the claim to protect them, Surah 6:35, 1065, Surah 4:82, its integrity is put into doubt when it fails to adhere to the content of the very scriptures it claims to protect and confirm, the Bible. Some contradictions I will mention. However, because they give doubt to the veracity of its content. Moses. The first concerns the adoption of Moses by Pharaoh's wife. Surah 28:9. This story contradicts the biblical Exodus 2:10 version, which states that it was Pharaoh's daughter who adopted Moses. It is important to note here that had Pharaoh's wife adopted Moses, he would have consequently been adopted by Pharaoh himself, making him heir to the throne. This fact alone makes the subsequent story of Moses' capture and exile rather incredulous. Now, Yahweh, or YHWH, according to the Quran, no one bore the name of Yahweh before John the Baptist, Surah 19:7. Yet we find that name mentioned in the Old Testament, 2 Kings 25:23, implying that it was a well-known name hundreds of years before the writing of the Quran. It is interesting to note that Yusuf Ali, in his translation of Surah 19:7, tries to circumvent this problem by translating this ayah as on no one by that name we conferred distinction before. Yet the word distinction does not appear in the Arabic at all. Is a translator permitted to change a text like this to correct an error? Obviously not. Ali is playing a dangerous game here. It is no wonder, then, that Muslims refer to all English translations as simply interpretations. Well, they are. But you can interpret it properly by utilizing normative rules of language, context, and logic. In his note, number 2461, Ali attempts to explain the problem by assuming that Allah had, for the first time, called one of his elect by that name. It would have been better had he left the text stand as it was written. Trinity. The Qur'an completely misrepresents the doctrine of the Trinity. The author of Surah 5 of 116 mistakenly thought that Christians worship three gods, the Father, the Mother, Mary, and the Son, Jesus. But Christians don't worship this doctrine of the Trinity at all. There was a heretical sect of Christianity called Coloridians who had the concept of the Trinity, which included Mary, who would have been in Arabia during the time of Muhammad. They are possibly the source for this obvious error. Another error is also found in Surah 5:73-75, where the Quran says, they do blaspheme who say Allah is one of three. Obviously, the accusation is against Christians, yet Christians do not believe God is one of three. We believe that God is one. The Yusuf Ali does a grave injustice in his translation by adding the phrase, Allah is one of three in the Trinity. The words in a Trinity do not exist in the Arabic text. Ali puts it into his translation, in an attempt to avoid the rather obvious mistake that Christians believe in three gods. I explained this to the men in Balboa Park. The Trinity is like, I'm a Trinity. I'm three personalities, but one person. Personality. I walk into Walmart. I'm a customer. Go to the park. I'm a visitor to the park. I go home, and I'm a son to my father and mother. Three personalities. Do I go to Walmart and pretend I own the place, or I'm a son of the owner? No. Do I go to Balboa Park and think I'm a customer of Balboa Park? No. I act in accordance with the mode of behavior in order to create the problem, solve, respond to the problem. I go to Walmart. I'm acting as if I'm a customer, because I am. God does it even more on the same principle. Okay, Ezra. The Quran in Surah 572 makes the mistake of claiming that the Jews believed that Ezra was the Son of God, the Messiah, just as Christians claim for Jesus. Nothing could be further from the truth. Internal contradictions which point to errors. Some errors point to internal contradictions within the Quran itself. I have dealt with these in another paper as well, but so we'll only list them here to jog your memory. Mary and Imran. One of the best known errors is that concerning the confusion between Mary, recorded in the Quran as the sister of Aaron, and the daughter of Imran, biblical Amran, as well as the mother of Jesus, by implication in these surahs. Though the two, Mary and Miriam, lived 1,570 years apart. Haman. Another well-known passage is that of Haman. In the Quran, Haman is referred to as a servant of Pharaoh who built a high tower to ascend up to the God of Moses. These are surahs here. But the Babel Tower occurs 750 years earlier, Genesis 11, and the name of Haman is correctly found in the story of Esther in Babylon, 1100 years after Pharaoh. Yusuf Ali believes that the reference here is simply that of another Haman, yet Haman is not an Egyptian name, but uniquely Babylonian. We got errors which contradict secular and scientific data. There are other stories in the Quran which do not stand up to the secular data which is available. These errors are possibly the most damaging for the credibility of the Quran as the perfect Word of God, because their veracity can be measured against the test of observable data, which is by definition neutral and binding. Ishmael. The descendants of Ishmael by all Arabs is in doubt within the secular world, since historically the first father of the Arabs was Qatan or Joktan, see Genesis 10, 25-30. Some of his sons and names are still found in geographical locations in Arabia today, such as Sheba, Hazarmaveth, Ophir, and Havilah. Abraham's nephew Lot would be another ancestor to the Arabs via the Moabites and Ammonites, as would Jacob's twin brother Esau and the 6 sons of Abraham's third wife Keturah. Yet they are not even mentioned as ancestors to the Arabs in the Qur'an. Samaritan. The Qur'an says that the calf worshipped by the Israelites at Mount Horeb was molded by a Samaritan, yet the term Samaritan was not coined until 722 BC, which is several hundred years after the events recorded in Exodus. Thus, the Samaritan people could not have existed during the life of Moses, and therefore could not have been responsible for molding the calf. It is interesting to notice that while Yusuf Ali attempts to change this word to Samiri and Pikthaw as Samiri, Araberi in the English, and Kazimirski in the French, both correctly translated Samaritan. Yusuf Ali, in his footnotes, bends over backwards to explain his choice by suggesting that the name could mean Shemer, which denotes a stranger, or Shomer, which means a watchman, the equivalent of Samara in Arabic, which he implies is close enough to the Samari he is looking for. Once again, we find an awkward example of Ali attempting to twist this translation in order to get out of it a difficult scenario similar to the examples of Beriktalitos, or the word Mahmad, which he uses to signify Muhammad in the Bible. The Arabic simply does not give Ali the leeway to concoct other meanings for this word. To be consistent with the Arabic, he should keep his translation consistent with the text, as Araberi and Kazimirski have done. Sunset. In Surah 1886 it states, "Until he reached the setting of the sun, he found it set in a spring of murky water. Near it he found a people. We said, either punish them or treat them with bad kindness." It is well known that only the superstitious in the age of Muhammad believed that the sun would set in a muddy spring. Isa, the name for Jesus in the Quran, is given as Isa, yet this is incorrect. Isa is the Arabic equivalent of Esau, the name for the twin brother of Jacob. The correct Arabic name for Jesus would be Yeshua, similar to the Hebrew Yeshua, yet the supposedly all-knowing Quran has no mention of it. Mountains. Surahs, all these surahs, tell us that God placed 2 down mountains on the earth like tent pegs to keep the earth from shaking after the earth was formed. For pre-scientific man, this would be sounding logical, since mountains are large and therefore their weight would have seemingly got a stabilizing effect on the earth. Yet we now know this logic to be quite inaccurate. Mountains were not formed or placed on the earth to render the earth's crust stable. In fact, the very existence of mountains is evidence of instability in the earth's crust, as they are found and pushed up by the colliding of tectonic plates, i.e. the migration of Arabia toward Iran has resulted in the Zagros Range, France pushing against Italy, producing the Alps, and the Indian plates nudging Tibet has given us the Himalayas. 1615. And he has cast great mountains in the earth, lest it might be convulsed with you, and rivers and roads that you might go aright. Mountains were not cast in the earth in order to keep it from convulsing. They were formed by the earth's convulsions themselves. This verse is not correct. And we have made great mountains in the earth, lest it might be convulsed with them. And we have made in it wide ways, that they may follow a great right direction. Again, the mountains were not created to keep the earth from convulsing. They were created as a result of the earth's convulsions. 31:10. He created the heavens without pillars, as you see them. Let me just correct this. There you go. As you see them, and put mountains upon the earth, lest it might convulse with you. And he spread in it animals of every kind. And we sent down water from the cloud that caused to grow therein vegetation of every noble kind. Again, same point. The origin of mountains is not as it says here. Have we not made the earth an even expanse, and the mountains as projections thereon, and the mountains how they are firmly fixed? The earth and mountains are not separate entities. They are part of the system of geology, as we now know. Alexander the Great. We'll get to that next time.